Well, I'll start with who I am. I'm kind of a hacker. I've always kind of built things, but I went to school for journalism. After graduating in 2014, I got a job as a web developer with the University of Florida. I wanted to improve my web skills, so I took that job. And then I'm not really a web person, so I got fired. And but I stuck with it, and I do some interesting stuff, mostly photography. I find myself in the woods a lot with my best friend and partner, and we go out there and we shoot and we bring back some interesting stuff. One photo of which you'll see today, and how it ties with 3D printing, we'll get to that. I'm not very good at reading instructions, so when I first got into this, it was kind of no man's land for me. I had to ask people a lot of really basic questions, like how do you wire a board together? Because the diagrams are out there. I don't Google so well, so I blew up my first printer. I went with a Prusa i3, which I should have a photo of, but I don't. But if you look closely, that's where it erupted in flames. And then I plugged it in again just to make sure that it was wrong, and it was. So at the advice of Lisa, I went to Amazon and for $200 and did all my problems. I got a $200 3D printer, and I literally just copied the configuration settings from the computers here at Hackerspace, and I went and just fulfilled my fantasy of building everything I've ever possibly wanted to build. The first thing I built, I mentioned I had a partner. We had a business called Symmetry. We built a lot of different things. Most of them were rather nefarious, so I'm not going to get totally into what those were for. But this was our ice mold that for years we talked about how cool it would be, and we tried to get money to build little prototypes, and we've tried to even build little prototypes, but my first day of 3D printing, I built one and I gave it to him. It'd be nice to have a photo and a video of that. I do, not in this presentation though. Next slide. So the next thing I tried to build, which drove me freaking crazy, was I wanted to build a stencil because I drew like web projects and I could never draw brackets. Like I just suck at drawing brackets. So I was like, I'm going to build with 3 levels of brackets, and I'm just going to have brackets everywhere and triangles. And that's when I first found out how difficult it was to make things in 3 dimensions. I'm not really a CAD designer. I think that's redundant to say, but this took so much math, and then by the end of it, it was too big by like 4 millimeters. So my program was like, do you want to shrink it down? And I was like, no, not really, because when you shrink it down, you can't make brackets because then they get too thin. So it was a bitch. My grandpa's a rocket scientist. Most of that didn't come down, but some of it did. So one day I was going to visit him, and I always kind of dreamed of making like Christmas presents for people, like on my 3D printer, because I'm not the most punctual person with Christmas presents. And I printed this out, and I'm like, Papu, I call him Papu. I'm like, Papu, here's this thing I made for you. And he saw only the backside, and I didn't really realize like why I was screwing up so bad, but this was a lesson I learned in leveling a printer. Like you have to level the bed so it prints correctly. But on the bottom side of this, once again, it'd be great to have photos, but I can use my hands. On the bottom side of it, it had like these like striations that go all the way across, and it's just this perfect pattern that comes from like either having like, in my experience, uneven tape for my like bed, and it just had all these like fuck ups in it. And so then I had to listen to my 80-year-old grandpa explain to me like how perfectly I got the striations of like the pattern, the spread pattern of the asteroid hitting the moon, and I'm like, Grandpa, that's the wrong side. But but I didn't tell him that, I just learned. So I mentioned I go into the woods. My friend always brags about his trowel. I didn't know what a trowel was. A trowel is a shovel, a very small shovel that's used in the garden. Upon bitching about this, he said, why don't you make one in your 3D printer? I said, okay. I take the challenge, and I made a shank. I did not know that was going to happen. It's one of those instances where I thought, like, oh, this is going to kind of turn out cool, and then I printed it out, and I was like, you cannot have these in prisons. They would be a tough sell, because that took about 20 minutes from start to finish. But these are some successes. This is a nefarious thing. It doesn't look nefarious, but it is. But it holds these things that get quite dirty. I'll just say that. but it's perfect. I've always needed this thing on my desk, and you really can't go buy it in a store. And it took me about, I don't know, 30 minutes to design. It takes about an hour to print out, maybe longer, probably about 3 hours now I'm really thinking about it. This came from camping also. It's a fast hook. It's one of the first things I designed, and it's because it rains, and I have a camera, and I have equipment all over me, and there's just shit going on always, and I needed something that I could throw and hook. And so the point of all of that is I started running into math, and I've always wanted to be a programmer, and it always looked so cool, and I took that job doing design, but not really programming, but it kind of touches on that. But through 3D printing, I wrote my first program. I was so freaking excited. I wrote my old professor in college, and I was like, haha, I did something with my life. This program finds the center point and 3D programs. And she wrote back, that's so cool. And I was like, worth it. 3 years of my life to write this little program. But it's simple. The program that I use already does it for me, but I don't read instructions well, and so I wrote that program. Amazon's amazing. I bought my elementary school calculator. It's not really important, but it's in there. So I make these cases for the nefarious things that I bring into the woods, and it was the first time I really needed my center point program. And it works, and I printed one out to bring and show to you guys, but I actually left it at home because I was so nervous about doing this presentation. The first thing that I printed that had practical use was a flash diffuser. I'm a photographer, and a flash diffuser costs about 11 bucks. It ships the next day with Prime, I imagine. But I was like, I'm just going to build one, so I designed one. And from that, I took that photo of that spider, which is awesome, because 4 years ago I found that spider, and I emailed the spider lady at the University of Florida, and I was like, I found this spider, and she's like, I think it's that. And I'm like, I don't have a photo of it. You guys know this, because I haven't had a photo of anything so far.
That's why you're photographer.
Yes. Not so good with the whole organization of things, but I do get the shot. It's just getting the shot to the person who wants the shot. That's the problem. We're working on it. Dog struts. My parents are just as disorganized as me, so we have these little doggy. Ooh, that's a video. But we have these little things, and that thing pees all over these things, and then you have to, like, my parents will prop them up. Like, they will take a wall, and they'll be like, I'm going to prop this up, and anytime you touch it, it falls. And so I'm like, fuck, don't do that. So I made these cute little things with the little paw prints. They're supposed to be a video. It's my only time lapse I've ever made. It goes way too fast. Come on. There it goes. And that's my parents' house. So instead of just chilling while I'm down there dog sitting and looking after the pea gates, I erected something. And I learned about bed leveling. I learned about pretty much every aspect of 3D printing that I kind of thought was over my head just by printing about 13 of these like rather large things. Like I have a 120 millimeter bed. It can handle about like 112. And that's it. And there's my gross laptop. We'll get away from that fast. Okay. And there's my little dog. I don't really follow too many rules. I don't really build struts that well. I'm pretty sure there's like struts in the real world that you can download, but I don't. And then I end up leaving it in the design. But this ended up being a GPS holder, and we use it. So what I'm doing next, as I mentioned, I love Amazon. I don't know that much about electronics. As you see, I blow a lot of things up. The printer is just one of many. But right now, I'm ordering a lot of LEDs and a lot of different diodes and shit that I don't really understand. But I'm going to Africa with the Peace Corps to teach math. I'm into education. I'm into mathematics. I'm not that great at mathematics. I'm okay. But I'm really into education. So in either June, we're looking at June, but I'm not so great at paperwork, as you can imagine. I might be leaving in the fall, but I'm going to teach mathematics. And so I'm trying to get to the point where I could bring a 3D printer there or assemble it there, ship the parts, make it there, and then get to like where I could teach programming through 3D printing. And right now I'm working on this thing I'm calling the shank beater water pump. The previous shank design happened to fit this kind of egg beater pattern to pull water out. So right now my buddy and I are working on water filtration and how to harvest water when you have really a weird juxtaposition of high technology with primitive third world culture. So that's the pump, and I'm working on it. this is a Publix lid, and I just love 3D printing and 3D design in CAD. And I think that's it. Oh, arrows. And I have a thing called Arrow Hammock that I'm going to put a camera in one of those suckers. All right, I'll come back with that. And that's it. That's everything. Okay. Yay.
Questions?
Yeah.
What CAD program do you use for the 3D work?
That's a great question. I use Tinkercad, and I found out about it through coming here and listening to Chris Hoffman talk, because there's Tinkercad and there's Onshape. And Onshape is just a little bit more professional. It's a little bit more like, I think Chris could probably explain it and has explained it in many lectures, but it's just a little bit more traditional to what, I don't know, AutoCAD would have been, whereas Tinkercad is a little more like Google SketchUp, where you can like pull shapes together and create shapes with other shapes. I tell people all the time, I'm like, it's a program that's made for or third graders, and then they kind of look at me like, oh, and I'm like, no, it's a good thing. Like you can get pretty intricate. The water pump thing I'm making is not, I mean, it's not silly. Like it needs to be pretty precise. The nefarious things too. That stuff. All right. Any other questions about the beginnings of 3D printing? What's up, Lisa?
What was the program thing you wrote? Centering? What does it do?
Center Point, we are, basically what it does is, you don't want me to walk you through the thing, you just want like the,
Yeah.
okay, so like this guy is like the base of my lid, and then this guy is going to be like the male part that goes into like the female part. So all it does is it takes the overall, and then it takes the second length, and then it says like this length needs to be this far from the left. And inside of this program, and I'm pretty sure in other ones, there's like a little check mark here that you can't see, but it's like, do you want to do this by the center, or do you want to do it by the left? And I always do it by the left, but the idea is that if everything has the 0 to 0 it out from, you can always center anything. Yeah, the stencil was the real changer with that, and I didn't think it was going to be, but if everything has to, like, even two things, like even if you have two things, you group them together, and then those two things become one overall, and then that one overall length against the overall can be centered. So, yeah. But, yeah. I've really...
Did you ever build another printer after you bought the printer?
No, I didn't. But I have learned a lot. Like I didn't think osmosis was possible in this, but I am like becoming more intuitive to things that are happening, because it automatically like defines like when that little thing goes, you know, that's like a clicker thing, like, and that's a stopper. And then you go on Amazon, and Amazon's like, we sell 1,000 stoppers for 25 cents, and I'm like rich in quarters, so. That's a true statement. Okay, anything else? I'm so happy and excited. It's over. Alrighty, thank you so much for your time.